Cuban Rusty Monses doesn't disagree with the idea of a border wall. In fact, he thinks it's absolutely crucial for his safety and security since he lives right on the border. No, Rusty's problem with the border wall is its location, its height, and how it's constructed. Rusty has seen it all in his 70-plus years living along the river near Brownsville, Texas, and would fully support a wall that wasn't as tall, was located on the border, and was constructed in such a fashion as to actually stop people from crossing. This is a scale model of the type of border fence Rusty favors. It utilizes the same technologies that prisons use, and while not everyone would agree that it's the ideal solution, as Rusty says, at least it won't rust and become even easier to climb like the current fencing. This is not an old section of fence. You'll notice the shiny keypad and hardware. The problem is that while the metal is reportedly thick enough to stop a .50 caliber bullet when new, as a policy, it cannot be sealed against rust. As that happens, the metal becomes rough and easy to grip, which coupled with the width of the slats and their V shape means a good climber can scale the wall with a couple 100 pounds on their back in just a few minutes.
Cuban met me in a local convenience store restaurant. He said the farm was too hot to conduct an interview. He was certainly right about the temperature, but I wasn't sure that's all that he meant. Soon after we sat down, the stories began pouring out. Tales of his father with the Yaqui Indians and riding with Pancho Villa during the Mexican Revolution.
What makes it so the fact that historically, the area, at least where the farm is at, has always been a location where it was easier to cross from Mexico into the short distance from the river to the property, and then from the property to a road. Easy access. This goes back. This goes back to, well, from the time when my dad was in the revolution in Mexico. He heard about this location about 1924. Okay? So this area is nothing new. It's always, for one specific reason, the river bottom in that area is hard. They call a hard bottom. You can cross cows, you can cross wagons, physically cross when the water's down to nothing, and not have to worry about quicksand. Other areas, upstream or downstream, are soft sand. You have that problem. Now, that is part of the history of the property. On the average basis, like I say, it's pretty quiet. Yesterday afternoon was the exception because of the fact that the people came up like they did. I was parked in the driveway 70 foot, 100 foot from the road. This vehicle comes up, I see it. People coming around, they're running for the truck. I get out with my phone, which, I love cricket. It decided it wasn't going to work. That I got his tag number, I got the description of the vehicle, I got the number of people, and I turned it in. And the process, he saw that I told him what I was going to do. That was when the threat came out. And I believed him, because there's an intent when somebody looks at you, I figured that he might. So last night I bugged out. I called the SO and I called the Border Patrol, told them what I was doing. They said, fine, don't worry about it. It's okay. You're covered. Okay, what's wrong with the current number one is the location. Where it was placed, because it was not done from a law enforcement aspect. It was done to suit a politician's. The politicians sat up in Washington, looked at a map and said, oh well, this is where it needs to go. They did not bother to ask any of the law enforcement people. This I know because I talked to the sheriff. I talked to people with DPS, the FBI, including the Treasury Department, the Customs, the Border Patrol, and everybody else. Department of Public Safety, the Texas Rangers. It is too physically so that, because if you have it goes back to the rule of running a ranch law, if you will. You put your fence on your boundary line. Designate that is mine from that point in. You keep out of there. You utilize as much land as you can for your livestock. Okay? Ranch law designates that you are proud and you take care of what you got. By not putting the fence up where it was supposed to, which is as close to the boundaries they can, within treaty limits. It's a farce. It's a piece of garbage. What it does is it limits when they can get down, because if the fence is down on the river, they can stage behind it easily. They can put all of their surveillance equipment right there. That gives you, as it stands, because the towers were put up by the fence. In some cases you saw it's 1.5 miles to the river. Now, don't get me wrong, this equipment is good, but it's got its limitations for being able to give you definitive information when you need it right now. Design of the fence. When you build a picket fence, because that's basically what it looks like. It's flat side to flat side so that you cannot get your foot or anything else in there. This thing was designed so it is corner to corner so climate. You can wedge your feet in it, number one. You can hang on to it. You don't need a ladder. You don't need rope. Number two, the way it was designed, prohibited non-corrosive paint putting on there so it wouldn't rust. The more it rusts, the easier it is to climb it because you can get a better hold of it. You don't. Okay? That was done at the onset. This goes back to one of the men that I knew as an engineer with the Corps of Engineers. He said, we told him, said, hey, what kind of oil are we going to put on there? You can't do that. Why? Well, you just can't. He said, why? You don't put bare steel out in an area that has a lot of salt in the air. How it is great. Well, that's not a problem. Yes, it is a problem. If you take the bridges, the steel bridges, and you don't paint them, they fall down. It was the plan in effect by the administration, not by the law enforcement, not by the Corps of Engineers. It was the people who were using this as an excuse to make extra money. And if people say that they're not, they're lying. We've got two models now. These are based on reality, on fact. It's not somebody's pipe dream. These designs are used by local, county, state, and federal agencies for protection of either prisons or military installations. All right? I have a man who I was in contact with, and he said, when I was overseas, he said, I can guarantee you, he said, that's what that design. And he said, guess what? They didn't cross over it. And he said, if by some chance they got over it, he said, they sure didn't go home. That I can tell you. And he said, that's the only way to keep them from getting over it and from under it. And he said, you have the surveillance equipment built in so that you know what's going on. You don't need to have little pods. A guy can walk around with and switch from camera to camera to camera as he's walking, so he knows what's up ahead. My dad came down to Brown with his dad in 1906. My dad was born December the 7th, 1893, and to make a long story short, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, was his birthday. His mother died on the 10th of December, 1941. My dad, because of his affiliations with the people in Mexico during the time that he was in the Mexican Revolution as Pancho Villa's personal, as well as Emiliano Zapata, he had friendships that he developed with the people, good and bad, on both sides. They came to my dad, one of the governors from Guanajuato, and there was a couple others from state of Sonora, state of Chihuahua. Now, the mandate was that Mexico was a neutral state, therefore they could not receive them. The only thing they could receive was humanitarian supplies. But they did know for the fact, and I checked with other historian military men from that era, that there were groups from Japan and Italy formed up because they knew the fastest way to get to the States was through Mexico. The same what we're dealing with now. Fort Brown was activated here in Brownsville. The CO came out with a couple of bigwigs farther up the line to the farm at night, and everybody, because it was a good place to go to. It was easy to watch. Mom and Dad told me that the object was, how do we get stuff into Mexico without getting caught? Because it's a violation. So they came up with this plan. They would lose it basically at Fort Brown at night. Oh, gee whiz, where'd the warehouse go? Hoorah. It goes out to the farm, they would load it up, cover it down with tarps, and then that night get it into Mexico. My mom and dad crossed over the bridge, would meet with the partisans that my dad trusted, and then they would take these arms and munitions, supplies, and start decimating them, falling to the partisans who did not want anything to do with the European fascist groups. This went on during the duration of the war. At the end of the time, my mom and dad, all this transporting and everything, at their own pocket. They didn't ask for a nickel. They didn't get a nickel in return.
Rusty's story and his unique perspective is just one of many from those that live in the no man's land on the other side of El Muro, the border wall.